The piano came in softly, the way it did on mornings that were carrying more weight than they let on. In the world of high-stakes corporate engineering, a single mistake can cost a fortune. But a deliberate one, the kind engineered with patience and precision by someone who has decided to stop explaining themselves and simply show the work, can be worth more than anyone in the room was prepared to calculate. Dominic Wells understood the weight of a single component, the way most men understood the weight of a bad day. He had spent 12 years inside the noise and heat of professional motorsport, building engines for Meridian Racing that did not just perform but won, repeatedly and in conditions that exposed the difference between engineering that was good enough and engineering that was true. He had stood in paddocks at 17 championship events and watched machines he had designed from the ground up cross finish lines first. The knowledge was real. The years were real. The years were real. And none of it on this particular morning was visible from the outside. He pulled up to the gleaming glass entrance of Prestige Auto Group in his 1967 Mustang. And the Mustang was the first thing anyone saw. To the untrained eye, it was a corpse of a car. Oxidized paint the color of something that had once been red and had been negotiating with the weather ever since. A dented driver's door, a rumble from under the hood that sounded like a mechanical argument in progress. Dominic knew what was under the hood. He had been building what was under the hood for 18 months, in the small single-car garage behind his apartment, under bare yellow bulbs, between the hours of midnight and 4 in the morning, when the world was quiet and Ella was asleep, and the only sound was the work itself. But the outside of the car was the outside of the car, and he had not had time to address that yet, and the outside was what people saw. Charlotte Voss was walking toward the entrance when he pulled in. She paused. She looked at the Mustang with the slow, measured expression of someone making an evaluation they consider straightforward. She was a woman who had built 14 luxury dealerships over 2 decades, who had moved through the automotive world with a precision that the industry press had spent years trying to fully describe. She looked at the oxidized paint and the dented door and the rumble that did not belong in a forecourt of this kind, and she said, in a voice calibrated for exactly the effect it produced, "I think you have the wrong address. The salvage yard is about 3 miles back. Someone who drives a corpse shouldn't be touching my technology." The words landed. Dominic felt them land. He had the specific, practiced stillness of a man who had learned, through years of working in environments where being underestimated was a recurring condition, that anger was a response you could not afford if you wanted to stay in the room long enough to matter. He did not answer. He did not answer. He walked inside. Jason, the hiring manager, took approximately 40 seconds to reach his conclusion. He saw the resume. 12 years, Meridian Racing chief powertrain engineer, and he saw the calluses on Dominic's palms and the faint ghost of grease at the base of his thumbnails that no amount of scrubbing fully removed. He saw a trade guy, a garage guy, someone whose expertise lived in a world that had nothing to do with citrus-scented showrooms and premium client experiences, and the particular register of confidence that luxury environments considered native. The interview ended before it had properly begun. Jason used the word culture. He used the phrase right fit. Dominic nodded and stood up and shook the hand that was offered and walked back through the showroom. He stopped at the Orion X9. The investors who had flown in from 3 continents watched a prototype that had been described to them as a breakthrough begin to fail in real time, in front of everyone, on a clear Tuesday morning. Then, a sound moved across the demonstration lot. Low and layered and unmistakable, a harmonic that came from an engine running at a level of precision that produced its own specific frequency, the way certain instruments did when they were played correctly. The 1967 Mustang rolled in, the oxidized paint, the dented door. The rumble that had been described 30 days ago as something belonging in a salvage yard. Dominic stepped out. The laughter did not start. He walked to the Mustang and lifted the hood. The engine block caught the morning light, milled to a mirror finish, the surface reflecting the faces of the people leaning in to look at it. The architecture was visible to anyone who understood what they were looking at. A thermal recovery system that solved the problem the Orion X9 had just failed to solve, built into the heart of a 40-year-old American muscle car in a 14-foot garage under a $40 bulb. A combustion architecture that reduced thermal losses by 38%, a number the major manufacturers had been chasing for a decade. He did not make a speech. He picked up the thermal scanner and walked to the Orion X9 and pointed it at the ventilation bracket and showed Charlotte Voss in front of her board and her investors and her head technician the exact point of failure. The same bracket, the same 2 degrees of deviation. The same thing he had explained 30 days ago to a man who had used the word janitor in the complete way that certain dismissals communicated everything without requiring the vocabulary. Charlotte stood very still. She was someone who had been building things for 20 years and understood, at a level below language, what she was looking at. She understood it the way you understood something that your framework had been wrong about. Not gradually, but all at once, the whole picture arriving complete, including the part where you had called the person carrying it a corpse driver in your own forecourt. In front of the board and the investors and the cameras, she said the thing she had never said in 20 years of standing at the head of rooms like this one. She said, "I evaluated a piece of engineering by the condition of its casing. I was wrong. The inside is the real part." She did not offer him a job. The shape of the conversation had moved past that. She offered him a partnership, the kind with real authority and a real stake and a mandate to build the next generation of the work that the Mustang was showing everyone was possible. Dominic listened to all of it. Then he said the one thing he needed to say. "My daughter gets out of school at 3:30. Charlotte looked at him for a moment. Then she smiled, the first genuinely warm expression she had produced all morning, the kind that came from a place past the professional exterior. "Vlad, that," she said, "won't be a problem." That night the kitchen was warm. Pancakes from scratch, the good ones, the ones with the extra vanilla and the slightly crispy edges that were Ella's specific preference and non-negotiable standard. Ella sat at the counter explaining to her drawings what a partnership was, in terms she was still developing. Dominic picked up the overdue bill from the counter and looked at it, and wrote 4 words along the bottom margin, "Pay Friday." Then he set it down and went back to the stove. He had been seen. Not for the car he drove, or the collar that frayed, or the calluses that would not smooth out. Seen for what lived underneath all of it. The knowledge built from 12 real years, the integrity that made him stop and speak up about a bracket when stopping and speaking up had cost him nothing except the dignity of being ignored. The love for a daughter that had reorganized his entire life into something that, it turned out, was worth exactly as much as it had always been worth. Never mistake the moment someone falls for the moment they have been defeated. Sometimes the most important person in the room is the one the world has already decided to stop watching. The outside has never once been the real part. The Mustang could have told you that, if anyone had thought to ask what was under the hood. So, if this story moves something in you, subscribe to Pure Kindness for more stories about the brilliance hidden inside people the world has underestimated. Everyone carries something worth seeing. What is a moment from your own life where someone finally looked past the surface and recognized your real worth? Leave it in the comments below. We read every single one, and someone scrolling through tonight needs to hear exactly what you have been through.